It is going to be disruptive.
So I fear for the next generation.
It is going to be more disruptive than a lot of people believe.
Sir, how their models survive when AI can automate their workflows directly.
And what's going to happen with our societies? What's going to happen with our jobs?
But I think just get ready for a real disruptive.
What's going to happen with our finances? And much worse, even to some extent, what's going to happen with our relationships? All right, so the moment has, I would say, finally come. And as many wise men and women who walked on the surface of earth have said, that perfect moment would never come. We have done so far a few episodes with the brilliant guests such as Sven, Minchi, Kwang An, and Ben, and many more amazing guests that we have in store for you guys coming soon. But I wanted to take this moment to speak to a very small number of you that are watching this right now. I hope that we're going to be a growing community, and I have a lot of conviction on that. And for those who didn't have a chance to dig a little bit deeper or to stalk me, I think this is a nice little moment for me to say hi to you. I think internet is, despite all credible, wonderful invention for the human society. I was born and raised in this small village north of Shanghai almost 38 years ago. By the day, in 2 days, I'm going to celebrate my 30-year-old birthday. By the time I was born, average GDP per capita for China at the time was $250 per capita, per person, per year. The same year, the average GDP per capita, just to put things into perspective, in France was $16,000. You can see that essentially 1 month of work in France, which is roughly somewhere between $1,300 to $1,500, would be equivalent to almost 6 years of work for average Chinese, right? Roughly speaking. And of course, sure enough, I am recording today from this beautiful city of Yunnan in the southwest of China, as I spent a few months in China here after 20 years of living abroad overseas, from Singapore to France, with some stints in Spain, Turkey, and Japan, and learning English and French, Japanese, and now recently in Vietnamese. On the way, sometimes as I share with my friends, and sometimes I feel very, very old. I mean, for some of you guys, 38 is already pretty old, but in all seriousness, I feel much older sometimes than 38, for the very simple reason that the small village that where I was born, that village with the old, beautiful, traditional Chinese ancient house, those houses are gone for sure, right? And they're replaced by villas. They're replaced by houses with air-conditioned fridges and tap waters and nice showers and cars, by the way, electric cars, right, for most households. The province where I was born, called Jiangsu, which is essentially where Shanghai used to belong. But of course, as Shanghai became so significant, it grew into a mega cosmopolitan mega city of 25 million people, it broke out of the province of Jiangsu. But the Jiangsu province today still is around 80 to 90 million people, with the GDP size about the same size as South Korea or Switzerland, because they're about the same size, and average GDP per capita around $20,000 to $25,000. But keep in mind that the purchasing power of the farmers, even the farmers and the workers, are very high because of the access to the cheap goods, basically, from the Chinese industrial system. Their GDP per capita, PPP, parity, purchasing power parity, is probably, I would bet, somewhere around $40,000 to $50,000, which is essentially around the same level as Western Europe and Northern Europe. I talk about all of this not to celebrate. Of course, it is something to, in my view, to be celebrated. To objectively, it is a miracle to bring hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. When you are $250 a year, you are at extreme poverty because you are less than $1 a day, right? And today you are at an equivalent to somewhere around $3,000 per month. I talk about this not because I think it is worth talking so much about. I think there's a lot of people talking about already. I talk about it because I wanted to speak to all of you, wherever you are, whichever country that you are from and you grew up, and whichever country that you live in. I want to talk to you, all of you about this, because I I do not aspire to be that economist pretending to have that perfect theory to you, but I can be, and I aspire to be your ordinary Chinese friend who just happen to be able to speak some of your languages. And regardless how we are thinking about where the world is going, which by the way, I really consider myself as a global citizen, of course, with the Chinese roots, and of course, with a lot of education and help from the West, and from Singapore, from France in particular. I believe that one of the biggest threats to our time and our children's generation will be actually as cheesy as it sounds, as much as Michael Jackson and all these people have sung about, is actually world peace. The reason I talk about this is because I have this unusual privilege to live through China, through Singapore, Southeast Asia. I spent quite a number of months in Vietnam per year nowadays as well. I spent a couple of months in Japan and I speak Japanese. Conversational, pretty lousy Japanese, but I do speak and I understand. And I love some of the Japanese anime, such as the Demon Slayer as well. They produce some of the finest products in the world, in all fairness. And I, of course, have spent 10 plus years in Europe, primarily living in Paris, but also across a few other cities in France. And of course, because of my work in investment funds previously, I traveled very extensively with a lot of carbon emissions, in all fairness, across the entire European continent of the Nordics, the Benelux, the DACH region, the Southern European region. And of course, because of my previous work at Google, now almost more than 10 years ago, I had a lot of opportunity to travel mostly to the West Coast, to California, all the way from, the Bay Area, from San Francisco to the Southern California of Los Angeles. And I still remember we spent some time in Anaheim in this Disneyland where Google was still spending money like a startup. You can call it pretty generously to privatize the entire Disneyland for a department of Google's global teams in order to foster that team spirit. And I doubt that Google would do it today, of course, for reasons that some people even argue might be good for the environment. But the long story short, the long route that I'm going, the long rant that I'm going here is to tell you that for all the luck and privilege that I had to live through this parallel world, and that is the West, Europe, US, and including Canada as well, where I had a chance to visit briefly, but also Southeast Asia and East Asia, Greater China area. And I cannot help but mostly feeling a excruciating pain as a global citizen who understands multiple language. The excruciating pain comes from the fact that when you sit down with individuals, most individuals in every single country where I have been, and I probably have been to 50 plus countries in the world, and I've had the chance to speak to all kinds of people from all walks of life, all classes of society, if you, for lack of a better word, and all sectors and activities of the world. I studied environmental science in Singapore. I studied industrial engineering in France. I had a chance to work with blue-collar workers in factories. I've done a lot of, I wouldn't call it internship. I would probably call it some sort of witness internship, right? Where you essentially spend days in factories observing how people are working, and you had a chance to sit down and have lunch and dinners with workers and so forth. And of course, I've had meals that are worth thousands of euros sitting down as investors or with investors, Michelin star restaurant, $50, $100 cocktails. And I don't take this as a way to brag, but I take this as a privilege that God or the universe gave to me to be traveling across parallel worlds. And I cannot stop but think that how parallel actually the worlds are sometimes. And a lot of times what I see is really divisions after divisions that across different wealth level of society, people don't overlap that much anymore. To the extent that in France, for example, there's this concept called Grand École, which essentially literally means grand schools that are elite universities, some sort of liberal arts college equivalent of France in engineering or business. I have had the chance of being hosted by host families in St. France, for example. And frankly, some of these families, so kind as they are, some of them didn't even hear about those schools. So divided the society has become. Imagine you are in this society, you work really hard, and you wish your kids will do very well. The society is so divided, so parallel across different classes that some of the parents, they don't even know what are those very prestigious schools. Of course, they wouldn't know the absolute best, such as École Polytechnique, which is essentially some sort of a Stanford or MIT equivalent. But if you ask them what are the other top 3-5 ones, a lot of them actually don't know, and much less know how to get there. You have divisions across political beliefs as well, right? I have a lot of lefty inclination because I'm an immigrant, because I come a long way. So I can connect really, really well with left-leaning friends and classmates and colleagues. And so I would attend parties and activities from left side. I have lived for 2-3 years in left-leaning communities as well. And sure enough, because I am also a tech startup founder, I'm also a tech investor, I have a lot of right or centrist friends as well. And with obviously exceptions, but I have to tell you that my time in the West, increasingly, I feel very lonely sometimes, because sometimes I feel like I'm the only guy that are attending both parties, if you see what I mean. Now, if you zoom out a little bit more and look at countries, it's much worse. It's absolutely much worse. Stories about whatever countries is almost always wrong, in a sense that we humans, for whatever intellectual reason, we all prefer simplifying and simplification. And maybe that's the fault of our primary school education. We like frameworks, we like simple equations, 1 + 1 = 2, 3 + 3 = 6. And we like black and white. We know, for example, there are 7 primary colors. You put them together, they become white, and you can divide them into 7 primary colors. But the reality, we all know that the color palettes have actually infinite number of colors. If you know the RGB theory or the hex number theory, there's infinite number of colors. And it is very, very true to the human societies as well. When you speak with people and you ask them questions around how do they think about the other group, or the other country, or the other religion, or the other belief, or the other political camp, most of us are succumbing. And I'm by no means putting myself outside of that equation, right? We have this tendency of just coming to a cohesive conclusion to ourselves. It's really hard for us to come to a nuanced answer. By the way, I'm not saying that we should be woke, right, that we don't know. But I am indeed saying that I sense the biggest danger that is exacerbated by algorithms these days that are continuously feeding ourselves, each one of us, including myself, the kind of stuff and content and the voice and the opinions that we already agree with. Our generation and the future generations, we have permanently lost the privilege our fathers and grandfathers had, that is to read newspapers, where we don't get that very highly personalized feed, that we get a chance to read easily people, even within the same political camp, but the opinions are not tailor-made to us. And the personalized tailor-made feed feels much more comfortable, because they gives us sense of certainty that somehow we're right. The problem, obviously, as all of us have seen, pushes our societies to tribalization, fragmentation, to the extent that you've seen incidents such as what happened in central France city called Lyon, Lyon, where a young extreme right person would be beaten to death by bare hands by their political opponents in a simple march and demonstration. And there's not even racial conflict in this case, because to the best of my knowledge, they're all white Catholics or Christians. Now, that happens within the same society. If you look at what's happening across countries, my observation is that it is probably much worse. And I want to warn all my friends who live in democracies as well. I want to make a very contrarian view that probably not invented by me. I don't know whether it's Socrates, whether it's Plato, that has warned already 2,000 years ago that democracies in worst economy cycles, in declining economy cycles, democracies can be succumbing, can be prone to be falling into the trap of deceiving cycle where we're going to elect politicians that are going to be populists, meaning they're going to speak the language that we like to hear. And much worse, they're going to pick and create those common enemies that is outside of the country, that is going to be the precursors and the potential triggers to wars. I think for those who are smart enough and who are well-read enough, I think you guys know what I'm talking about. This comes back to this little loop of why I'm doing this monologue, but also all the interviews of people that you guys don't necessarily get to hear very often, is if I have anything to tell my future kids, what I have done to potentially pull the world back a little bit from the cliff, from the brink of the world collapsing, this would be my answer. This would be my little efforts that I have. Frankly, I think that I owe it to the world. And frankly, I also think that those of you who think that you have a slightly different voice, I would highly recommend that it is not so much about you anymore. It is about all of us emerging and representing potentially voices that are not so mainstream, that we let each other hear each other, right? So my goal is, as I shared with my team, that I'm not aiming, and frankly, that is out of my control. I'm not aiming how many fans, how many followers I'm going to have. Frankly, I have no control over that. But my efforts, and I want to make it very public today, is that I would like to at least commit to 1,000 sessions, 1,000 interviews. So the past 2 weeks I've done 4 sessions now. Why 1,000? Honestly, it could be 2,000. 1,000 just feels to me a serious enough target that is big enough for me to feel excited about, to pull myself out of bed every day, but also probably small enough so that I know that I have a good chance of hitting it. So if I manage to do, let's say 2 sessions per week, which is going to be a good challenge, I probably will be able to do 100 sessions, which is 50 weeks, which means 100 sessions per year, which is going to be a decade project. 10 years, I'm going to be able to make, roughly speaking, about 1,000 sessions. Frankly, I'm very much looking forward to the day in 10 years. I'm half looking forward to it because I'm going to be 48. I feel much older now than 38. But I'm also looking forward to it. What happens in this 10 years? I hope the world will still be around. I hope we don't have more wars. And I hope also that through my little project of this efforts of bringing different people from different walks of life, people from different regions, people from different cultures, that I can contribute to bring a little bit more light and to use the AI language to bring a little bit more trustworthy firsthand data to each one of you across the topics that I'm passionate about, right? So the topics that I would like to cover are going to be geopolitics, obviously, because it impacts everybody's life, right? What's happening with the wars, right? Hopefully there's not going to be wars to be talked about, but the pessimist side of me believes that unfortunately we're still going to be talking about wars for a long time. That's a very sad truth, but I'm prepared. I don't know whether I'm prepared, by the way, but I hope that I'm prepared to be living with this chronic sickness of this world that is the wars. But how do those wars impact each of our countries and our lives, our children, our societies, our jobs, our professions? That is coupled with obviously the second type of disruption that is happening right now is massive technological turmoil, I want to say. That AI certainly overblown by a lot of vested interest. I want to alert anyone that is listening to this, right? Do not believe everything that is being said in the news. As someone jokingly said that, the CEO of Oreo would probably say that you should eat Oreo every day and probably 10 every day. You should be asking yourself, why would they say so, right? But despite all this overblown kind of frenzy about AI, I do personally believe, because I've been using them day in, day out, my team have been using them day in, day out, it is going to be disruptive. It is going to be more disruptive than a lot of people believe. And what's going to happen with our societies? What's going to happen with our jobs? What's going to happen with our finances, right? And much worse, even to some extent, what's going to happen with our relationships. Because the days when people are going to have AI girlfriends and robot girlfriends, robot boyfriends, unfortunately, they're probably not very far. And The robots are going to be coming as well. The robots are going to be delivering our food, driving our cars, probably doing our cleanings in our households, mowing our grasses, probably much more than this that we don't even manage to imagine yet. There's going to be a lot of regulation changes in different countries, and the country is going to be weaponizing regulations as well. And how does that impact our lives and jobs and professions? There's going to be also increasingly, due to all these disruptions in the wars, probably increasing number of immigrants and refugees across different regions. And how do we integrate different people, all these groups of people traveling through the borders? How do we take care of them without causing too much societal disruption? How do we integrate them? How do we make sure the societies are ready for this? There's going to be a lot of aging in a lot of societies. Japan, South Korea, Singapore, already happening. It's most certainly going to happen with China and probably Vietnam pretty soon. And of course, a lot of Western countries, needless to say. What does that mean to our societies, right? There's going to be a lot of challenges to our health, right? With all the sugar, I want to say sugar pandemic, right? All the food additives pandemic. We're going to have a lot of challenge in producing enough food, nutritious food for ourselves. For those of you who are interested, you should be also watching out, reading this article by Jeremy Grantham. Certainly he's a billionaire, but I believe as a scientific person, I believe his article was tremendously wonderful and insightful, called The Race of Our Lives. You should search Race of Our Lives PDF. He talks about the problem of our soil across the planet. Our soil are being depleted. We're going to have problems and challenges producing enough food for everyone. Of course, we're going to come up with all kinds of crazy scientific ways of solving that problem. But our food, I don't know whether you guys notice, our apples are less tasty than before. Our tomatoes are less tasty than before. They look the same, but they don't have the same number of nutrients. So all of this geopolitical, political, societal, socio-economic, technology, all these forces coming together, that is the world that we're going into. And I sense this little responsibility for myself of, as someone who has traveled, I call myself the civilizational interstellar traveler, the east and west, the south and north, the technology capital world, the industrial world, and now most recently the geopolitical military world. It is an insanely complex world to live in, for our kids to live in, for even ourselves to figure out what's happening. And when I speak to so many different people, including very educated ones, a lot of people come into me and say, essentially, they have given up in following up with what's going on in the world because it's just too much. There's too much happening. There's too much happening. So there's a retreat into the countryside, growing our own tomatoes. There's a retreat into caring about the little things in our gardens. I think there's some Taoism and Buddhism beauty in it. But I also do think that if enough of us doing that, maybe there's some beauty of politicians having less power to us, but potentially we're also going to create an increasingly more isolated world with fragments. And that's going to increase the danger of the world into much bigger hot wars. And that concludes my long rant today and this opening session of saying hi to each one of you. And for whoever that is listening and watching this, you have my contacts where to find me in the show notes and in the introductions of this account. And I sincerely and impatiently look forward to the more sessions that we're going to have. And I'm going to look forward to your comments. I'm going to look forward to your questions, to your emails, and to your suggestions as well. And for those who have listened until here, I would love to thank you very much for your time. And I hope to see you guys very soon.